Fantastic. Okay, so we go from the world of entrepreneurship and science to our next speaker, who, to some extent, is helping create the environment. We heard Jonathan mention Center for Life. Our next speaker has been doing, how many years has it been now that you've been chief executive?
Too many.
Too many years, for a very long time. Linda Conlon has been there fighting the good fight, and tell you, it seems like something that you think, oh, there's loads of money and support to do what she does. And I know from working with Linda directly as well as her staff, that everything they do, not everything, but to get the funding, the support, the political collaboration, and the general collaboration is actually been pretty difficult, surprisingly. But she's fought on and literally helped to change the face of Newcastle in all kinds of positive ways, some obvious and some less obvious. And here to tell that story is Linda Conlon. So Linda, would you come to our stage, please?
Thank you. Great. Well, I actually feel a little bit of a fraud standing here when I look at the title of Great North Greats. And then I look underneath and it says Ordinary People and Extraordinary Achievements. And I think you couldn't get anybody more ordinary than me. You know, I'm not a scientist. That might surprise you when I'm running something like the Centre for Life. I'm not an academic and I'm not an educationalist either. You know, I'm a prime example of somebody who wasn't really sure what they wanted to do. And I've tried lots of things over the years. I've had jobs which have bored me so much I've almost fallen asleep. I think I've been sacked from one or two of them. And it was really quite latish on in my career when I became entranced by a project for which I have a great passion, and that is the Centre for Life. And I think, you know, the best advice that I can possibly offer you standing here today is to just think a little bit ahead. If I'm going to have to work until I'm 66, you guys who are only 17 and 18 now, you're going to have to work until you're probably 100. So you better do something you like doing, because unless you're lucky enough to not have to work for a living, or you've got very, very rich parents, you're going to have to work. So you might as well work at doing something which satisfies you personally, for which you have a passion, and you want to get up in the morning and you want to go to work, and you might even change the world. So really, really do think a little bit about that. The working life is very long. Do something you guys want to do. I'm ordinary. The Centre for Life, I think, is anything but ordinary. What I wanted to do, because you're local, is just to ask, what do you know about the Centre for Life? Can anybody shout out anything at all that you know about it? Anything at all? Yes, there's Planetarium. Any of you been on school visits? Oh, well, you're a ripe audience for me, then I shall have to target you all afterwards. But if I look at this, and I put these images onto the screen, you can see they're all flying up there, and they paint a picture of a very, very diverse set of activities. The Centre for Life is a really, really odd project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it came about, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the various component elements, because I think that you'll be surprised at some of the things that go on in that complex of buildings. Huge, huge variety. We're standing not very far from Scotswood Road, which I think is very much part of the northeastern psyche. It's cited in the famous songs from the Bladen Racers. And you can see there the little building, the little old building. That's Jonathan's building where Quantum DX actually work from. But many years ago, of course, it looked like this. It was full of abattoirs. You could smell the blood in the air as the animals knew they were going to be sent off to slaughter. When the project was actually being built, and it originated in the late 1990s, the site had been Newcastle's first site for infectious diseases. And we knew when we started building the project that we were going to find the remains of bodies. And these were people who had died, often when just visiting the city, And the newspapers at the time were awash with stories of how these poor people had died from things like bubonic plague and anthrax, when in fact they died from very, very ordinary things that they wouldn't die from today, which is infected boils, for example. So very, very sad indeed, but certainly I think it was the first time that the imagination of the public was captured by thoughts of a plague cemetery on the doorstep. Lots of people ask why the Centre for Life and why Newcastle? And Newcastle has a real expertise in genetic science. We're really, really lucky to have the universities and the hospitals here with such fantastic knowledge and expertise in genetics. And around the late 1990s, not many people were very aware of forensic science. We all know about it now. We all know about DNA testing. We read about it. We see it on television. But in the late 1990s, it was beginning to emerge as a science, but people didn't really know very much about it, and they were curious. And so a group of us, I was one of that group, there was a group of 4 people, got together and thought, how can we manage to capture some of the lottery money which had been introduced in the late 1990s. There was a body that was set up specially to try and create projects to celebrate the millennium. And the Centre for Life really was a response to that lottery. We knew we had the expertise. We knew people were curious, really, really curious to find out more about DNA and genetic science. So what could we do to actually create a project which could build on that fantastic knowledge, but would also be interesting to the general public? We didn't want it just to be of interest to people who wore white coats and had PhDs. We wanted it to be interesting for the general public. So if we fast forward a little bit to the year 2000, and this is what the Centre for Life looks like today. You might have visited, you might have walked through the square, you might have had a go on an ice rink there, you might have accessed many of its facilities. And it is a highly unusual, if not unique, concept. There isn't anywhere in the world which brings together this unique collection of activities. Not only is there really, really top-end research, that research is translated into benefit for patients, it's translated into business. There are biotechnology business there, and we heard a wonderful account from Jonathan about what Quantum DX is doing. He's based at the Centre for Life. And of course, a very big component is devoted to science education and engagement, and also ethics, because a lot of what is happening in genetic science is highly controversial. People are a bit wary, a bit scared, they don't quite understand it. And so we have to ask the question, just because you can do this, should you do this? A few facts of life. It's a big investment. You know, at the minute, it's standing at around 90 to 100 million pounds of investment. When it was built, it was half that. So its success really is shown in the fact that it's doubled its investment over a period of around a decade. You're all very young in this audience, but if there are any oldies, you'll remember how grotty that bit of Newcastle was. It was an old car park, and it was really down at heel. It was not very attractive at all. And now, today, it really looks pretty smart. You might be surprised to learn that there are over 500 people who work on site, and they come from 35 countries. And that's pretty spectacular. People there from 35 countries. Why do they come to the Centre for Life? They become because of its international reputation and status. Very strong focus on medical research and health, and the public bit, the Science Centre, it gets around 300,000 visitors annually. I reckon about 500,000 people in total must access the site on an annual basis. So it's very, very well used. But what I don't think people truly understand is what a spectacular success story is sitting on the doorstep. It is truly unique. Visitors come to see the Centre for Life, to come to see the model, almost on a weekly basis. We receive visitors from every continent of the world who are keen to see how they can possibly bring together all of these components. So you've got the full circle of science. You don't just have a little bit of research or a little bit of a clinic or a science engagement activity, all brought together in a really cohesive way. So what are we trying to do on that site? It's pretty simple what we're trying to do, but it's hard work. We're trying to get everybody inspired by science. When I say everybody, I mean from the preschoolers to 80, 90 plus. We recognize that not everybody who comes to the Centre for Life wants to be a science or needs to be a scientist. But we do reckon that most of us are curious about science. We're reasonably intelligent human beings. And some of the things that are happening in the world of science affect us, whatever we go on to do in life. So we're interested to find out about infectious diseases, for example, nuclear energy, tons of subjects which might affect you, might affect your family, your friends. You want to know about it. So it's important that we can help you to make sense of some of these controversial issues. The second thing that we do is support the world-class research that takes place on the site. Newcastle University's Institute of Genetic Medicine is based there. It's around 300 of them. There are 2 National Health Service clinics there as well. So a dual mission, getting everyone enthused by science, hopefully getting some of you into science careers, and supporting that world-class research in medicine. How do we do all of this? Well, there's an exciting mix of activities, from the research to clinics to business to engagement to ethics. It's a pretty heady mix. You recognise this guy, one of his first visits to the northeast of England, David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, he chose to come to the Centre for Life. Why did he choose to come? Because he'd heard about the groundbreaking work in science, in helping people with serious muscular dystrophy, for example, heart problems. All of that activity is taking place. All of that research is going on at the Centre for Life. This one is really, really quite impressive. This guy here that you see having the light shone into his eyes, he was a bouncer in a nightclub, and he had acid thrown into his face. And one of his eyes virtually lost the sight, badly scarred, really, really hurting, really, really painful. And what the scientists at the Centre for Life have done is they've taken the good stem cells out of his functioning eye, taken them and put them into the bad eye. And it's truly dramatic. You know when you go to the opticians and they put the big chart up and you have to say what you can see and what you can't see? It's the same process with this guy. After about a month, he could just about see the top 2 lines, and after several months had gone by, he could read the lot. Fantastic success story at the Centre for Life. Also, you may have kept an eye on what's been going on in IVF. People who cannot have babies or who have problems conceiving. At the Centre for Life, we've got a fertility clinic where patients access the clinic, and I don't think we've got there all of the babies who've been born. That's just a snapshot. We've lost count. We used to keep a tally on them, but in 15 years, I think we've lost count of the number of people who've been able to conceive with the help of fertility clinics at the Centre for Life, and the groundbreaking research which has gone on and has helped to create the world's first human embryo, for example, and have helped women with serious mitochondrial disease, which means they've got faulty cells, and if they're having a baby, that baby is frequently born with some horrendous genetic conditions. So all of that work taking place at the Centre for Life. I was going to talk about what Jonathan did very briefly, but I won't, because he's done it so eloquently and at length. We're really, really pleased that Quantum DX are at the Centre for Life. They're not going to be there for much longer, and that's because they're a big success story. They're moving on into bigger and better premises. This is the jolly bit. This is where we make science fun. If you haven't been at the Centre for Life, I would urge you to come and have a look, because we are in the business of trying to make it entertaining and accessible. We're not school. We're not going to preach at you. We're going to try and make it relevant to you and your lives. So what we offer to the public are theatre shows, a planetarium, which is the best in the UK. Some of you might have been to see Body Worlds, which was the key exhibition at the centre last year. Really, really did get the centre talked about in a big way. People visiting from afar afield as Aberdeen to Exeter, over 350,000 people, and they loved it. Schools programmes, we do 40,000 educational experiences for school children. hugely successful. They love being in a real science village, in a real science environment. And of course, if schools can't come to us, we will go to them. You're a tough audience at 17 and 18. It's not easy to get you to come to places like science centres, but I can promise if you do want to come, these are the sorts of things that we will do. We'll try and focus on topics that we think are relevant to you. We've done designer bodies, we've done drugs, we've done a whole range of topics that we think are meaningful to you. I want to show you a very, very, very short video. It's only 2 or 3 minutes because I think this encapsulates the thrill of making things, of tinkering with things, of looking at things and pulling them apart. How do they work? She was showing us the circuit board that she'd made. This is the sort of thing, I think, which gets a new generation of young people interested in science, technology, engineering, because it's really something for curious minds. It takes place every year over a weekend in April. Great fun. Come if you can. Volunteer if you would like to come along and see what we do. But I'm just going to play it for you now. It's only a couple of minutes.
I love maker fairs. So many interesting people, so awesome.
I love Makers Fair because it's really random. You've got so many different parts of science coming together and just showcasing loads of different areas and aspects, and it's really engaging with the kids.
Electrifying.
You can't get more diversity, more intellectual minds together, more spirit of England and the rest of the world joined as one here. It's just great, it's fantastic.
You get to make awesome things and it's so awesomely awesome.
Fantastic. Awesome. Brilliant.
It's just such a lovely atmosphere and people doing things and sharing what they love to do and what they're passionate about, and it's a really, really nice thing.
Just magical in the respect that we've travelled like 6 hours to get here. We're here for 2 days, so in that respect, it's blown our expectations. We really thought it was going to be something, but this is really amazing.
I kind of just came to keep him company, but it was actually really interesting. I thought I would have been bored, but we made like tons of stuff.
There's so much more that you can build that you don't realize you could build. There's so much more you could tinker with. Yeah, just fun.
You don't have to be as geeky as him to come. You can still have a good time.
We have had the best time here at Maker Faire UK. It has been so much fun.
We tour all over, mostly to Maker Fairs, because these are our people.
This is where we find our kindred spirits, where we find the people who are excited about what weird and crazy things are happening in the world and what they can make themselves.
I'd just like to introduce a young colleague I've brought with me, who's going to enter stage left. And I thought it would be good for her just to spend 2 minutes telling you a little bit about her career pathway, why she chose science communication, and I think she's going to do something exciting with this bottle.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, afternoon everyone. My name's Lana and I am an education officer at the Centre for Life, and I would just like to share with you a little bit about my background and how I came to work at the Centre for Life and do what I do. So when I was at school, I decided to do biology, chemistry, English and sociology, so quite broad spectrum of A-levels. That's because I wasn't really quite sure even then what I wanted to do for my career. I did enjoy the sciences, so then I actually decided to go and do biomedical science at Newcastle University. I really, really enjoyed my degree, but again, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. So I stayed on and I did a master's, so that involved a lot of laboratory research. And I decided that lab research, although I found the master's really interesting, wasn't really for me. So at that point, I decided to train as a secondary school science teacher. And I did that for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed working with children, trying to engage them in science. But the really fun aspect of my job was the after-school science club. So that was the highlight of my week. And I really enjoyed it because the kids were super interested. They got to pick what they actually got to do, so they had sort of ownership over their own learning. And they just had time to explore scientific interests that they had, which was really fun. So after about 2 years, the opportunity at the Centre for Life came up to actually work as the education officer there. And I got the position. And what I'm involved in at the Centre for Life is managing and delivering the workshops that Linda mentioned to the school groups that we have coming in. And the sort of incentive for schools to bring their children into us to do these workshops is that they're really fun, engaging, they're all curriculum linked, but we do try to include elements in the workshops that teachers would find really difficult to actually do in class. So, for example, one of the workshops, we've got a giant pendulum that sort of swings across the lab, which is really, is really easy for us to set up, but obviously might be more difficult in schools. We've got lots of really specialist scientific equipment that we use for a lot of the workshops that is really more likely what you'd find in a research lab than in a school. So we have lots of equipment that really helps us to make our workshops really engaging and interesting, and linked to real life and what scientific research and things like that are really like to do. So what I've actually brought along is one of the demonstrations, well, a version of the demonstration that we actually have running in the theatre show at the minute. And our theatre show is called Destination Space at the minute, so it's all about it's all about rocketry. So I'm going to show you the demonstration now. So one of the good things about my job is that I get to do fun things like this quite a lot. So what we have is we just have a water cooler bottle, and we're going to fill it with a little bit of, I've got propan-2-ol, but you can use any fuel. And the idea is that if you're linking this into an explanation of how rocketry works, or how we can get rockets off the ground, obviously a combustion reaction can occur if we set this alight, whereby we make loads of hot carbon dioxide. And the hot carbon dioxide, with it having a lot of kinetic energy, forces its way out of the narrow opening at the top and actually produces a force that, if this demonstration was actually done upside down, could push the bottle actually up into the air. And that's sort of the basics about how this actually works. So once I've got the alcohol in, I'm going to set it on a step so we can actually all watch this together. Actually, so on the front rows there, you might notice that you actually have some safety specs. Yeah, so it's just a precaution. I'm going to stick mine on now. I'm going to get out. Because this does, I'm not going to spoil it, but it produces a nice effect. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to spin it a little bit, and we're actually just going to turn that alcohol into a vapor. And then once all of the alcohol is in vapor form, we can have a go at setting it alight and sort of seeing the effect. And I obviously get to, with being the education officer, I get to sort of develop new workshops, and I get to play around with lots of fun, exciting things in the labs, this being one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my long stick so that I don't have to stand too near it. There we go. So what I really would just like to finish with is that If any of you are interested in doing a science degree or anything like that, it's not just lab research that you can go into. There's lots and lots of different opportunities out there to get involved in all sorts of things. And if you look for them, they are there. But that's it. That's me done.
Thank you. I just wanted to say one thing in conclusion, and that is, I think you can do anything. If I can do what I've done, I'm sure that you can do similar things. If you've got passion, if you've got determination, and if you have a real desire to learn, you can be a Great North Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great. Thanks for a great talk. Sorry, we're running a bit short on time, so I'm going to unfortunately have to press the accelerator. Thanks so much. Great to hear. Actually, I didn't actually know a lot of the history about the Center for Life, and great to see some of the stuff that happens there again. Seeing rocket propulsion on stage is a first for me, so that was pretty cool.